They said the explosion was an accident. They said the dog was gone. And winter did the rest, burying tracks, paperwork, and questions under snow. But Ethan Walker didn't believe it. A former U.S. Army veteran, silent and disciplined, he lived with one truth that refused to freeze. You don't close a case without a body. Then, in the middle of a white, unforgiving winter, he saw her. Nova, alive, hidden. What followed wasn't a rescue. It was an unraveling, a fake accident, a wildlife trafficking route buried beneath snow, and powerful men who never stepped into the cold. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about loyalty, truth, and what happens when winter fails to hide a lie. Winter had settled into Greyhaven the way an old memory settles into bone, slow, quiet, and impossible to shake. Snow fell steadily, layering the town in white until streets, rooftops, and trees blurred into the same muted shape. The air carried a deep stillness, the kind that swallowed sound and made even the smallest movement feel deliberate. In Greyhaven, winter wasn't a season. It was a condition. Ethan Walker stood on the narrow balcony of his third-floor apartment, looking out over the frozen street below. His breath rose in pale clouds before disappearing into the dark. He wore the same jacket he always did, an old multicam field jacket, the fabric softened and faded from years of wear. On his head sat a black cap embroidered with simple white letters, U.S. Army Veteran. It had once been crisp. Now it bent easily in his hands. 2 metal dog tags rested against his chest, hidden beneath layers of clothing. They tapped softly when the wind pushed against him, a quiet rhythm he barely noticed anymore. On his left wrist, a large black military watch ticked steadily. The glass was scratched, the strap worn thin, but it never failed him. Ethan trusted things that endured. Behind him, the apartment was dark and silent. He didn't turn on lights unless he needed them. Silence didn't demand anything from him. Silence didn't ask questions. A shape moved at his side. Rex sat just inside the open balcony door, his body perfectly still. The German shepherd's coat, rich brown and deep black, caught flecks of snow drifting in from outside. His ears were upright, alert. His eyes followed the tree line at the far edge of town, where the forest pressed close like a wall. Rex wore a tactical collar, thick and functional, no tags clinking, no leash attached. Sewn into the fabric in clean block letters was his name, Rex. He didn't look like a pet. He looked like a soldier waiting for orders. Ethan rested his gloved hand briefly on Rex's neck. The dog didn't turn his head, didn't shift his posture. He acknowledged the contact the way trained animals did, by remaining steady. 1 year, Ethan said quietly. The words vanished into the cold. 1 year since the explosion. The warehouse had been on the north side of town, past the rail lines and close to the forest. An old structure, officially unused. When it went up, flames lit the sky for miles, bright against the falling snow. By morning, there was nothing left but twisted metal and frozen ash. The report had been clean. Too clean. Structural failure, secondary ignition, no criminal indicators, and one final line Ethan could still recite from memory. K9 asset presumed lost. No recoverable remains. Nova, Rex's mother. Ethan stepped back inside and closed the balcony door. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and cold air. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if rushing might disturb something fragile. On the small kitchen table lay a single photograph. It was old now, edges worn soft. In it, Nova sat in the snow, her posture calm but alert, eyes sharp with focus. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking past it, toward something unseen. That was how Ethan remembered her. Not obedient, aware. Nova hadn't been trained to track weapons or explosives. She had been part of a quiet, specialized program that worked alongside environmental units, detecting trafficked wildlife, illegal animal transport, hidden containment. Ethan had supported the unit before his discharge, mostly logistics, mostly perimeter security. Nova had been good at it. Too good. Ethan picked up the photograph and studied it under the dim kitchen light. He traced a finger along the crease that cut across one corner. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. His face remained still, the way it had learned to be long ago. "I didn't see you die," he said. He'd said it many times before, to the photo, to the empty room, to the quiet hours just before dawn. Rex rose smoothly from the floor and moved to Ethan's side. The dog sat close, his shoulder brushing Ethan's leg, his gaze lifting briefly to his handler's face before returning to the room. Ethan exhaled slowly. He remembered the night of the explosion too clearly. The way the snow had been falling harder than usual. The way Nova had stopped just short of the warehouse entrance, ears forward, body tense. The way she had refused to advance until Ethan gave the signal, and the way the radio crackled seconds later with panic and confusion. Afterward, people told him what they thought he needed to hear. These things happen. Dogs don't always make it. At least it was quick. But no one could tell him where Nova's body was. No collar, no remains, no final confirmation. Ethan had learned in war that death was rarely subtle, and disappearance was rarely accidental. Outside, a plow rumbled down the street, pushing snow into tall gray banks. Greyhaven kept moving. Life adjusted. People adapted. Ethan did not. He placed the photograph back on the table and reached into a small wooden box beneath it. Inside lay a strip of fabric, burned at one end, frayed at the other. Part of a training lead. Nova's. Officially, it had been destroyed. Ethan closed the box. Rex stood and walked to the door, sitting down with his back straight, facing outward, always watching, always ready. Ethan pulled on his gloves and jacket. "Let's go," he said. Rex didn't need the words. He was already there. Outside, the snow kept falling, quiet, patient, hiding everything. Winter had settled into Greyhaven the way an old memory settles into bone, slow, quiet, and impossible to shake. Snow fell steadily, layering the town in white until streets, rooftops, and trees blurred into the same muted shape. The air carried a deep stillness, the kind that swallowed sound and made even the smallest movement feel deliberate. In Greyhaven, winter wasn't a season, it was a condition. Ethan Walker stood on the narrow balcony of his third-floor apartment, looking out over the frozen street below. His breath rose in pale clouds before disappearing into the dark. He wore the same jacket he always did, an old multicam field jacket. The fabric softened and faded from years of wear. On his head sat a black cap embroidered with simple white letters, U.S. Army Veteran. It had once been crisp. Now it bent easily in his hands. 2 metal dog tags rested against his chest, hidden beneath layers of clothing. They tapped softly when the wind pushed against him, a quiet rhythm he barely noticed anymore. On his left wrist, a large black military watch ticked steadily. The glass was scratched, the strap worn thin, but it never failed him. Ethan trusted things that endured. Behind him, the apartment was dark and silent. He didn't turn on lights unless he needed them. Silence didn't demand anything from him. Silence didn't ask questions. A shape moved at his side. Rex sat just inside the open balcony door, his body perfectly still. The German shepherd's coat, rich brown and deep black, caught flecks of snow drifting in from outside. His ears were upright, alert. His eyes followed the tree line at the far edge of town, where the forest pressed close like a wall. Rex wore a tactical collar, thick and functional, no tags clinking, no leash attached. Sewn into the fabric in clean block letters was his name. Rex. He didn't look like a pet. He looked like a soldier waiting for orders. Ethan rested his gloved hand briefly on Rex's neck. The dog didn't turn his head, didn't shift his posture. He acknowledged the contact the way trained animals did, by remaining steady. 1 year, Ethan said quietly. The words vanished into the cold. 1 year since the explosion. The warehouse had been on the north side of town, past the rail lines and close to the forest, an old structure, officially unused. When it went up, flames lit the sky for miles, bright against the falling snow. By morning, there was nothing left but twisted metal and frozen ash. The report had been clean, too clean. Structural failure, secondary ignition, no criminal indicators, and one final line Ethan could still recite from memory. K9 asset presumed lost. No recoverable remains. Nova, Rex's mother. Ethan stepped back inside and closed the balcony door. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and cold air. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if rushing might disturb something fragile. On the small kitchen table lay a single photograph. It was old now, edges worn soft. In it, Nova sat in the snow, her posture calm but alert, eyes sharp with focus. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking past it, toward something unseen. That was how Ethan remembered her. Not obedient, aware. Nova hadn't been trained to track weapons or explosives. She had been part of a quiet, specialized program that worked alongside environmental units, detecting trafficked wildlife, illegal animal transport, hidden containment. Ethan had supported the unit before his discharge, mostly logistics, mostly perimeter security. Nova had been good at it. Too good. Ethan picked up the photograph and studied it under the dim kitchen light. He traced a finger along the crease that cut across one corner. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. His face remained still, the way it had learned to be long ago. "I didn't see you die," he said. He'd said it many times before. To the photo, to the empty room, to the quiet hours just before dawn. Rex rose smoothly from the floor and moved to Ethan's side. The dog sat close, his shoulder brushing Ethan's leg, his gaze lifting briefly to his handler's face before returning to the room. Ethan exhaled slowly. He remembered the night of the explosion too clearly. The way the snow had been falling harder than usual. The way Nova had stopped just short of the warehouse entrance, ears forward, body tense. The way she had refused to advance until Ethan gave the signal. And the way the radio crackled seconds later with panic and confusion. Afterward, people told him what they thought he needed to hear. These things happen. Dogs don't always make it. At least it was quick. But no one could tell him where Nova's body was. No collar, no remains, no final confirmation. Ethan had learned in war that death was rarely subtle, and disappearance was rarely accidental. Outside, a plow rumbled down the street, pushing snow into tall gray banks. Greyhaven kept moving. Life adjusted. People adapted. Ethan did not. He placed the photograph back on the table and reached into a small wooden box beneath it. Inside lay a strip of fabric, burned at one end, frayed at the other. Part of a training lead. Nova's. Officially, it had been destroyed. Ethan closed the box. Rex stood and walked to the door. sitting down with his back straight, facing outward, always watching, always ready. Ethan pulled on his gloves and jacket. "Let's go," he said. Rex didn't need the words. He was already there. Outside, the snow kept falling. Quiet, patient, hiding everything. Ethan didn't leave the rail yard that night. He walked the perimeter slowly, letting Rex move ahead when the dog needed space, calling him back when the wind shifted and carried unfamiliar scents. Snow continued to fall, filling footprints almost as soon as they were made. It was the kind of weather people used to disappear. Nova stayed near the shed, never straying far, never relaxing completely. She watched Ethan with measured attention, like someone deciding whether a truth was safe enough to share. The older man, Frank, he had finally said his name was, kept his distance. He didn't hover. He didn't interfere. He simply stayed where he was, as if he understood that some reunions weren't meant to be touched. Ethan crouched near the edge of the tracks and brushed snow away with his gloved hand. Underneath, the gravel was disturbed. Not fresh, but not old enough to be dismissed. He followed the line with his eyes. The marks didn't belong to boots alone. Wheels, heavy ones. "Rex," Ethan said softly. Rex moved in, nose down, breath slow and deliberate. The dog paused, then shifted direction, tracking parallel to the rail line rather than along it. Ethan followed, careful not to break the pattern. 10 yards in, Rex stopped again. He pawed once at the snow and looked back. Ethan knelt and cleared the surface. Metal, a fragment of steel latch bent outward, edges scraped clean, not broken by heat, broken by force. Ethan closed his fingers around it. The warehouse report had said the explosion destroyed everything inside, that nothing usable remained. This hadn't been inside. This had been moved. He stood and looked out toward the tree line. Snow clung to the branches, heavy and silent. Beyond the trees lay a narrow service road, one that no longer appeared on updated maps, but still showed up faintly in older transit records. Ethan remembered the warehouse layout too well. The official maps said it had been inactive, but the permits told another story. Temporary access licenses, environmental waivers, short-term storage exemptions issued in winter months. The kind of paperwork that passed unnoticed when no one wanted to look too closely. He exhaled slowly. Nova watched him. "You smelled it first," Ethan said, not expecting an answer. "Didn't you?" Nova's ears twitched. She stepped forward, then turned, moving along the edge of the forest. Not running, not leading, showing. Ethan followed. The path narrowed as they entered the trees. Snow muffled sound. The forest felt closed in, intimate in a way that pressed against the senses. Rex moved behind Nova now, careful, respectful. The trail ended at a shallow ravine. Below, half buried beneath snow and branches, sat the remains of transport crates. Not destroyed. Abandoned. Ethan climbed down slowly and examined them. The crates were reinforced, steel-lined. Air holes drilled along the sides. Inside, remnants of straw and torn netting clung to the corners. Animal transport. Illegal. He didn't need labels to know what had been moved through here. The size, the strength of the containment, the way the crates had been dragged rather than lifted. Nova stopped at the edge of the ravine. She didn't descend. She had already done her job. Ethan's jaw tightened. So this was the missing piece. The warehouse hadn't exploded because it failed. It had exploded because it worked. It had been a winter transfer point, used when snow erased tire tracks, when storms grounded aerial surveillance, when fewer eyes were watching. Animals moved through Greyhaven under the cover of cold, and Nova had found them. Ethan straightened and looked back the way they'd come. The snow fell heavier now, wind pushing it sideways. Somewhere in the distance, an engine hummed briefly before fading. Someone was still using these routes, and someone was counting on winter to protect them. Ethan returned to the shed as darkness deepened. Frank stood near the doorway, hands tucked into his coat. "You find what you were looking for?" the old man asked. Ethan met his gaze. "Enough." Frank nodded once. "They'll come back." "I know," Ethan said. "They don't like loose ends." Ethan glanced at Nova. She stood tall despite the cold, eyes sharp, body coiled with quiet strength. Not a lost dog, not a stray, a witness. "They won't touch her," Frank said carefully. "Not anymore. Too risky." "That's what they think," Ethan replied. Rex moved closer to Nova, sitting beside her. The resemblance between them was unmistakable now, not just in shape or color, but in bearing. Discipline, patience, awareness. Two soldiers from the same line. Ethan made a decision then. Not sudden, not emotional, deliberate. He wouldn't confront anyone tonight. He wouldn't call attention to what he'd found. Soldiers survived by choosing the right moment, not the loud one. He pulled his phone from his pocket and scrolled through old contacts. Numbers he hadn't used in years. People who worked quietly, who understood environmental crimes and how they were buried under paperwork and weather. He stopped at one name. A woman who asked uncomfortable questions. A woman who didn't like winter being used as an excuse. Ethan didn't dial yet. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked at Nova. "You stayed alive long enough to matter," he said quietly. "That wasn't an accident." Nova held his gaze. Snow continued to fall, blanketing the ravine, the crates, the tracks, trying to erase what had been uncovered. But Ethan knew better now. Some lines, once seen, never disappeared. Ethan waited until morning to move. Not because he was afraid, but because daylight made the right kind of silence. In the dark, every step felt like a mistake. In the day, things looked ordinary. Ordinary was camouflage. He returned to town with Rex beside him and Nova behind, never more than 20 feet away. She kept to the edges, slipping between snowbanks and shadow like a thought you couldn't catch. The only time she came close was when Rex stopped, as if she needed to confirm he was still there. Ethan didn't try to leash her. The second he forced control, he'd lose trust. Nova wasn't disobedient. She was cautious in a way only a working animal could be. Trained, then betrayed, then forced to survive on instincts that paperwork couldn't rewrite. Back at his apartment, Ethan cleared a space at the kitchen table. The same table where the photograph had sat for a year. Now it became a map. He spread out what he had. Printed permits, old transit logs, photos of the crates he'd found in the ravine, a hand-drawn sketch of the service roads that didn't exist on new maps. He wasn't building a story. He was building a chain. Rex lay near the door, eyes open. Nova stood in the corner of the living room, half hidden behind the couch, watching through the gap like she was guarding an exit that only she understood. Ethan opened his laptop and searched the warehouse address. Greyhaven Transfer Facility. Official status: inactive. Ownership: a holding company with a forgettable name. He clicked deeper. The holding company didn't own anything else in Greyhaven. No storefront, no office, no staff list. It was a shell. Thin enough to see through if you knew to look. Ethan did. He followed the paper trail the way he followed footprints in snow. slowly, refusing to be distracted by the blank spaces. The permits he'd pulled weren't signed by local officials. That was the first red flag. They were processed through a regional office 2 counties away, issued in bursts each winter, always short-term, always temporary. Temporary was how people hid permanent crimes. He searched the name on the permit approvals. A consultant, not a public employee. A private compliance advisor who worked with conservation groups and shipping companies. Someone who helped organizations navigate regulatory landscapes. That phrasing always meant the same thing. Pay enough, and the rules bend. Ethan leaned back in his chair, jaw tightening. He stared at the name until the letters blurred. Then he made the call. The phone rang twice before a woman answered. "State Environmental Crimes," she said. Her tone was calm, clipped, tired in a way that sounded like she carried more cases than justice. Ethan's voice stayed even. "My name is Ethan Walker, former Army. I'm calling about Greyhaven Transfer Facility." A pause. "Greyhaven?" she repeated. "That file's closed." Ethan expected that. "It shouldn't be," he said. Another pause, longer this time. "How did you get this number?" Ethan didn't answer directly. "I found transport crates in the woods. Reinforced? Vent holes? Straw lining? Not burned? Not destroyed? Abandoned?" Silence on the other end of the line sharpened. "What's your location?" she asked. Ethan looked at Nova in the corner. Rex at the door. Snow falling beyond the window like a curtain. "Not over the phone," he said. He heard her exhale, the sound of someone deciding whether this was a waste of time or the thing she'd been waiting for. "Name?" she asked. "Agent Maya Reed," she answered before he could. "And you're not the first to mention Greyhaven." Ethan's grip tightened slightly around the phone. "Then why is it closed?" "Because it died in winter," she said. "And winter makes people lazy." Ethan's mouth twitched, almost a smile but without warmth. "It wasn't an accident," he said. "I know," Maya replied, and the quiet certainty in her voice hit harder than any accusation. Ethan blinked slowly. "You know." "I suspected," she corrected. "But suspicion doesn't hold up in court. Paper does. And paper is exactly what disappears when the wrong people get nervous." Ethan glanced down at the permits spread across his table. "Who are the wrong people?" he asked. Maya hesitated. "That's the problem. They're not people to the public. They're board members, donors, sponsors. They sit on panels. They shake hands in heated rooms while the rest of the state shovels snow." Ethan went still. "Men who never step into the snow." Maya continued, voice lowered. "You ever hear of North Pines Wildlife Initiative?" Ethan recognized the name. Everyone did. They sponsored school programs, ran donation drives, posted glossy photos of rescued animals on social media. "Yeah," he said. "They're clean on paper," Maya said. "Too clean. Their shipping partner is a logistics firm called Armitage Freight. They move medical supplies, research specimens, conservation equipment. Nobody questions it because the branding is perfect." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "And Greyhaven?" "A soft transfer point," Maya said. "Winter cover, rail access, low oversight, easy to burn and blame on old wiring." Ethan exhaled slowly through his nose. The pieces in his mind clicked into place with cold precision. Nova didn't just find animals. She found the route. Maya's voice shifted slightly, more cautious now. "Listen to me. If you're involved in this, you need to be smart. You can't be the loud guy with a hero complex." Ethan's eyes flicked to his dog tags, resting under his shirt like a reminder of who he used to be. I'm not loud, he said. I can tell, Maya replied. But you're also not invisible. If they think you have proof, they'll start cleaning. Fast. Ethan looked at the window. The street outside was white and empty, snow drifting into neat lines like the town was trying to stay polite. Tell me what you need, he said. Maya paused. I need something that ties Greyhaven to Armitage Freight or North Pines. Not rumors. Not a feeling. A link. Ethan stared at the permits again, at the signature blocks and approval codes. He'd been looking at the wrong part. The paper wasn't the answer. The movement was. I have routes, Ethan said. Tracks, a service road, a ravine drop site. Routes don't convict, Maya said. Names do. Ethan didn't argue. He'd been in enough briefings to know how truth got buried in procedure. Maya added, if you can get me a vehicle ID, plates, dot numbers, anything, then I can open a federal request. Quietly. Ethan looked toward the living room. Nova had moved closer. Not all the way, just enough to be seen. Snow clung to her fur like frost on dark fabric. Her eyes were steady, and for the first time, there was something in them that looked like intent. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was working. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. Not grief, not relief. Purpose. All right, he said. I'll get you your link. Maya's voice sharpened. Ethan, don't go alone. Ethan glanced at Rex, still watching the door. I'm not alone, he said. He ended the call and sat still for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of his apartment. The heater clicked. The wind pressed snow against the glass. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed briefly, then vanished. Ethan stood and pulled on his jacket. Rex rose instantly. Nova stepped forward, then stopped at the edge of the room, watching him. Ethan didn't speak. He didn't gesture. He simply opened the door. Rex walked out first, ears up, posture ready. Nova followed. Outside, the snow fell like it had something to hide, and Ethan was done letting winter do the hiding for them. The forest didn't welcome them back. Snow came down heavier than the night before, thick flakes twisting in the wind, swallowing depth and distance. Visibility dropped to a narrow tunnel of gray and white, the kind of weather that discouraged questions and rewarded those who planned to ask them anyway. Ethan moved carefully, keeping to the edge of the service road Nova had shown him. Rex ranged ahead, never more than 15 feet out, his movement economical and quiet. Nova followed behind, offset to the right, watching their blind side with the patience of a veteran who knew where danger preferred to hide. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The road itself was barely a road anymore. Packed snow layered over frozen mud, with long, shallow ruts that refused to disappear. Ethan knelt and brushed snow aside with the back of his glove. The grooves were too clean, too consistent. Heavy trucks, repeated use. Winter preserved what it couldn't erase. Rex stopped abruptly. Ethan halted and crouched, scanning the trees. His breath slowed. His pulse did not. Rex angled his head toward a bend in the road where the trees thinned. Nova froze behind Ethan, ears forward, body taut. Not alarm, anticipation. Then Ethan heard it. An engine. Low. Diesel. Idling. He eased forward until the bend opened enough to see through the snowfall. A truck sat just beyond the trees. White. Unmarked. Clean enough to look harmless from a distance, but too clean for this road. Snow had been brushed off the hood recently. The tires were thick, reinforced, designed for weight. Ethan raised his phone and snapped a photo, then another. He zoomed in, steadying his hands against his knee. Dot numbers ran along the door panel in faint black lettering, partially obscured by slush, but readable. He didn't need the logo. Maya Reed had been clear. Names came later. Numbers opened doors. The truck's rear doors were closed, but the latches told their own story. Scratched, reinforced, recently handled. Rex's hackles lifted slightly. Nova stepped closer, nose high, scenting the air. Her body language shifted, focus narrowing, muscles aligning. Ethan recognized it immediately. She had smelled this before. The engine cut. A door opened on the far side of the truck. Ethan flattened instinctively, pulling Rex down with a quiet hand signal. Nova slid back into shadow without instruction, melting into the snowfall as if she'd never been there. Two men stepped out. Both wore insulated jackets with no markings, gloves, beanies pulled low. They moved without urgency, confident in the assumption that winter kept them alone. One of them laughed. The sound felt wrong in the forest. "Quick in, quick out," the taller one said. "We're already behind." "Relax," the other replied. "Nobody's out here." Ethan memorized their voices, their posture, the way they stood with their backs to the trees instead of facing them. Men who didn't expect trouble. The men walked toward a narrow path leading deeper into the woods, the ravine route. Ethan's jaw tightened. They were still using it, still moving animals through Greyhaven. Nova's ears pinned back for a fraction of a second. Not fear, recognition layered with something colder. Ethan waited until the men disappeared from view before moving. He crept back, pulling Rex with him, retreating the way he'd come. He didn't run. Running left chaos. Chaos left mistakes. They reached the tree line opposite the road and stopped. Ethan sent the photos to Maya. No message. Just the images. Seconds passed. Then his phone vibrated. Got it. Dot registered to Armitage Freight. You were right. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Armitage. Maya's next message came fast. This opens federal jurisdiction, but listen to me. Once I move on this, they'll know someone talked. You need to stay invisible. Ethan looked out toward the bend in the road again. Snow blurred everything, but the presence lingered. I don't plan to be seen, he murmured. Rex shifted beside him. Nova moved forward a step, then stopped, looking at Ethan directly. Her eyes were steady, intent. She wanted to finish it. Ethan shook his head slowly. Not yet, he whispered. We do this clean. The forest fell quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Alert, coiled, like the moment before a command. They waited until the engine noise returned. The truck rolled forward slowly, tires grinding over frozen ruts. As it passed, Ethan captured one last photo of the rear. Another partial number, another piece of the puzzle. Then it disappeared into the white. Ethan stayed crouched long after it was gone. This was the edge, the moment where the hunt shifted direction. He knew the pattern. In war, once you confirmed a supply line, the enemy changed behavior. Routes shifted. Timelines collapsed. People got careless, and careless people made mistakes. Ethan rose slowly. We're done here, he said. Rex stood. Nova followed, keeping pace now instead of distance. They moved back through the trees, leaving the road untouched, letting the snow reclaim it. Back at the edge of town, Ethan stopped and looked once more toward the forest. The wind carried the scent of diesel faintly, then not at all. He dialed Maya. She answered immediately. You got me what I needed, she said. This is enough to bring in federal wildlife and transport units. When? Ethan asked. Soon, Maya replied, but not loud. We move quiet. We watch who panics. Ethan nodded, though she couldn't see him. They will, he said. Maya hesitated. Ethan, once this starts, they'll start erasing backups. Paper, digital, people. Ethan glanced at Nova. They already tried, he said. She's still here. Silence held on the line for a moment. Then Maya spoke, voice firm. Stay sharp. You're officially a witness now, whether you like it or not. Ethan ended the call and stood still, letting the cold settle. Winter had done its job for a year. Now it was working against them. Winter answered with teeth. The morning after the truck passed, Greyhaven woke to a deeper silence, one that felt intentional. Snowbanks were higher. Streets were emptier. Even the wind seemed to move more carefully, as if it didn't want to leave a trace. Ethan noticed the changes immediately. He always did. The car parked across from his building wasn't there yesterday. Same with the second one down the block. No plates in front. Engines off, windows dark. Observation without presence. He didn't react. Reaction invited attention. Instead, he finished his coffee, pulled on his multicam jacket, and clipped the strap on Rex's tactical collar. The dog rose, posture set, eyes steady. Nova watched from the corner, still keeping space, but closer now than she'd ever been. Ethan opened the door. Outside, the cold bit hard. Snow crunched underfoot, too loud for his liking. He adjusted his pace, matching the rhythm of the street. The cars didn't move. He took Rex and Nova toward the river path, not the forest. Patterns mattered. Today, he broke one. Halfway down the block, his phone vibrated. They're cleaning, Maya Reed texted. Armitage pulled 3 permits overnight. North Pines canceled a fundraiser. Someone's nervous. Ethan didn't slow. He felt it too. The subtle shift that happened right before pressure turned into force. In war, it came as radio silence or sudden activity. Here, it came as paperwork and polite emails, and men who stopped asking. At the river, the ice had thickened along the edges, gray plates grinding softly where water still moved beneath. Ethan paused and let Rex scent the air. Nova circled wide, watching the tree line. Snow continued to fall, thicker now, turning the world into a corridor. That's when Rex stopped. Not at a sound, at an absence. Ethan followed the line of Rex's gaze to a cluster of reeds near the water. The snow there was disturbed, smoothed over too carefully. Footprints had been brushed away, not buried. Someone had been here recently. Watching. Ethan's phone vibrated again. They know about Greyhaven, Maya wrote. Someone accessed the DOT query you sent me, not my office. Ethan exhaled slowly. Okay, he murmured. Now we're talking. He turned back toward town, choosing a route that curved through public spaces, open, visible, unthreatening. If they wanted to push, they'd have to do it where witnesses existed. The cars were gone when he returned. That didn't relax him. It sharpened him. At his apartment, Ethan locked the door and drew the curtains halfway. Not closed, not open. He laid everything out again. Permits, photos, timestamps. He copied files to 2 external drives, labeled neither, and slid one into the lining of his jacket. The other went into a vent behind the heater. Redundancy saved lives. Nova watched him work. She stepped closer, just out of arm's reach, and lowered herself into a sit. Calm, present, ready. You feel it too, Ethan said softly. Nova didn't blink. By dusk, the snow had become a wall. Visibility dropped to nothing. The streetlights cast halos that didn't touch each other. Greyhaven felt cut off from the rest of the world. a pocket of quiet where things could disappear. A knock came at the door. One knock, then another. Measured. Ethan didn't move. Rex stood, ears up, body angled between Ethan and the door. Nova rose without sound, slipping to the side. An exit Ethan hadn't even noticed her favoring before. The knock came again. "Mr. Walker," a man's voice called. "Just a few questions." Ethan smiled without warmth. Questions came with badges, or they came with intentions. He approached the door, stopping short, placing himself where the wall offered cover. "You have the wrong apartment," he said evenly. A pause. Then a polite chuckle. "We're with North Pines, just following up on a donation inquiry." Ethan glanced at Nova. Her ears flattened. Just a fraction. That name. "I don't donate," Ethan replied. Another pause. Longer. "We can come back," the voice said, "when it's more convenient." "You won't," Ethan said. Silence pressed against the door. Then footsteps retreated, slow and deliberate, letting him know they could be patient. Ethan waited 10 full minutes before moving. He checked the hallway. Empty. Outside, tire tracks cut through fresh snow and disappeared. He dialed Maya. "They came to my door," he said. Maya swore softly. "Then they're scared. That's good and bad." "Bad how?" "They don't scare easy," she said. "When they do, they simplify." Ethan looked at Nova, then at Rex. "They won't touch us here," he said. "No," Maya agreed. "They'll try to move the route. Tonight." Ethan closed his eyes. "Where?" Maya didn't hesitate. "The old mill road, south of town. They'll dump anything risky and burn what's left." Burn. The word landed heavy. Ethan grabbed his jacket. "We're going," he said. "Ethan!" "No," Maya snapped. "Federal units are hours out. You can't—" "I'm not stopping them," he said. "I'm watching." He ended the call and stepped into the storm. The mill road was worse than the rail yard. Snow piled high, wind cutting sideways. Ethan kept low, using the trees for cover. Rex moved with purpose. Nova stayed tight now, no distance between them. They reached a rise overlooking the clearing. Below, headlights cut through the white. 2 trucks this time. Men moved fast, unloading crates, smashing wood, dousing something with fuel. Ethan lifted his phone, captured everything. A crate broke open. Inside, movement, alive. Nova tensed, a low sound rumbling in her chest. Not a growl, a warning. Ethan's heart pounded, but his voice stayed steady. "Easy." He recorded, time-stamped, backed it up to the drive in his pocket. Flames leapt up, bright and ugly against the snow. The men worked faster now. Someone looked up, straight toward the rise. Ethan didn't move. Neither did Rex. Nova stepped forward, just one step, placing herself between Ethan and the clearing. Not protection, statement. The man squinted, then turned away. They hadn't seen them. Not yet. When the trucks finally pulled out, leaving fire and ash behind, Ethan stayed put until the light faded and the snow began to reclaim the ground. He exhaled. This was it. The edge of the cliff. He sent the files to Maya with a single line. They burned the evidence, not the truth. Her reply came seconds later. "I'm moving now." Ethan looked at Nova. "You held," he said quietly. She held his gaze. Snow fell harder, erasing the clearing inch by inch. But it was too late. Winter had lost control of the story. Dawn came without ceremony. Snow still fell, but lighter now, drifting instead of striking. The sky over Greyhaven turned a pale, colorless gray, the kind of morning that made everything look honest by force. Ethan stood at his kitchen window and watched headlights move through town that didn't belong there. Unmarked SUVs, government plates, purpose. Rex sat at his heel, posture calm, alert. Nova stood near the doorway, no longer hiding in corners. She had moved closer overnight, as if some internal calculation had finally tipped in one direction. Ethan's phone buzzed. "They're in," Maya Reed texted. "Federal wildlife, transportation, quiet warrants, no press, not yet." Ethan didn't reply. He didn't need to. Outside, the engines idled briefly, then shut off. Doors opened. Voices stayed low. No lights flashed. No sirens. The kind of operation designed to leave as little footprint as possible, except where it mattered. By mid-morning, the mill road was sealed. Agents moved through the snow with careful efficiency, photographing what the fire hadn't erased. Ash was sifted, meltwater collected. Tire impressions cast in foam before the cold could claim them again. Ethan watched from a distance, far enough to be ignored, close enough to know when it was time. Maya approached him near the edge of the river path. She wore a heavy coat and carried a folder pressed tight to her chest. Her eyes were tired, but sharp. "You did exactly what we needed," she said. Ethan nodded once. "It wasn't hard." Maya snorted softly. "Don't lie, it always is." She opened the folder and showed him a photo. One of the trucks, plates clear now, dot number highlighted. Beneath it, a list of names: shipping supervisors, compliance officers, board members who had signed off on temporary storage. "Armitage freight is done," Maya said. "North Pines too. At least the version everyone thought they knew." Ethan's gaze flicked to Nova. "And the animals?" he asked. Maya followed his look. "Recovered what we could. Some were moved last night before the burn, but enough stayed behind to make the case." She hesitated. "Nova changes everything." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "A living witness," Maya continued. "A trained detection dog tied to the original site. Her alerts match the routes, the crates, the manifests we pulled. She bridges the gap between paper and reality." Ethan exhaled slowly. Nova stood still, snow dusting her back. Rex leaned against Ethan's leg, quiet solidarity. "Will they try to bury it again?" Ethan asked. Maya shook her head. "Not this time. Too many agencies involved. Too many eyes. Winter helped them hide it, but it also kept everything preserved." She paused, then added, "They tried to call it an accident again." Ethan's mouth tightened. "Of course they did. We didn't let them," Maya said. "We're rewriting the record." By afternoon, word moved through Greyhaven in fragments. Road closures, environmental review teams, a routine investigation. No one said wildlife trafficking, not yet. But people noticed. The fundraiser banners came down. Trucks stopped showing up where they shouldn't. Office lights stayed on late in buildings that usually emptied by 5. Pressure traveled upward. Ethan returned home with Rex and Nova just as snow began to fall again, steady and patient. He set his jacket aside and sat at the kitchen table. Nova approached slowly. This time, she didn't stop at the edge of the room. She sat across from him, eyes level, posture composed. Not asking, acknowledging. "You're safe now," Ethan said quietly. "You don't have to work." Nova held his gaze. Then she stood and walked over to Rex, lowering her head briefly to touch noses. Rex didn't move, just accepted it, like a hand on a shoulder between equals. Maya called at dusk. "They made the arrests," she said. "Quiet ones. No cameras. Executives don't like spectacle." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. "And the warehouse?" he asked. "Officially reclassified," Maya replied. False incident report. Evidence suppression. Environmental crime. Transport fraud. She paused. Your name's clean. Ethan opened his eyes. I wasn't worried. I know, Maya said, but some people will sleep better. Ethan glanced at Nova again. What happens to her? He asked. Maya smiled faintly. That depends on you. The words landed heavier than Ethan expected. She's trained, Maya continued. Certified, and now documented. She could go back into service, under the right conditions. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the weight of the past year shifting into something else. Not relief, alignment. She decides, he said. Maya nodded. That tracks. The call ended, and the apartment settled into quiet again. Snow brushed against the windows, soft and consistent. Ethan stood and retrieved something from a drawer. A tactical collar. Cleaned, reconditioned, the stitching intact. He knelt slowly in front of Nova and held it up, not reaching, not forcing. Nova studied it. The room felt suspended. Then she stepped forward. Ethan fastened the collar gently around her neck. The click was soft, but final. Rex sat beside her, posture perfect, eyes forward. 3 figures stood together in the fading light. Outside, winter continued its work, covering, quieting, reshaping. But the truth had already stepped into daylight, and it wasn't going back. Winter loosened its grip slowly. Not all at once, never that generous, but enough to let light travel farther than before. Snow still covered Greyhaven, but it no longer pressed down like a secret. It rested where it fell, honest and visible. Ethan walked the length of the K9 training yard just after sunrise. The fence line was dusted white. The flags hung still. Beyond the trees, the town moved quietly, returning to routines it had postponed while the truth worked its way through the system. Ethan wore the same multicam jacket, the same veteran's cap. 2 dog tags rested against his chest. The black military watch marked time without commentary. He didn't need ceremony. He didn't need words. He needed alignment. Rex waited at heel, posture steady, ears forward. The tactical collar sat firm around his neck, the stitching clean, the name clear. Rex watched everything without tension, as if the world had finally returned to a shape he recognized. Nova stood a step behind, not hidden, not hesitant. Her coat was healthier now, her weight returning, her eyes clear. The tactical collar fit her like it always had. Functional, unadorned, earned. She scanned the yard with the calm confidence of an animal that knew her place had never been taken from her, only delayed. A gate opened quietly. Captain Harris stepped inside, clipboard tucked under his arm. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He nodded once at Ethan, then once at the dogs. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Ethan didn't answer. He raised his hand slightly. Rex moved first, sharp, clean, precise. Obedience drills came back like muscle memory. Sit, stay, recall, focus under distraction. Snow kicked up beneath his paws, but he never broke line. Nova followed. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She worked. Scent discrimination. Route recognition. Alert without aggression. Each movement measured. Each response exact. There was no doubt in her posture. No uncertainty in her timing. Ethan stood still, hands at his sides. He didn't guide. He didn't interfere. This wasn't about proving something to anyone else. It was about letting the truth stand on its own. When it ended, Captain Harris closed the clipboard. "K9 Nova," he said, voice carrying across the yard. "Operational standards met." No applause followed. None was needed. Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling something settle. Not relief, not pride. Completion. By afternoon, the patrol car rolled through Greyhaven again. No escort, no announcement. Rex took his place in the back, eyes tracking the streets through the mesh divider. Nova moved beside him, posture relaxed but alert. Two figures, aligned without instruction. Ethan adjusted the mirror, checked the radio, and eased the car forward. They drove past the river where ice still clung to the edges, past the mill road, now blocked and quiet, past the old rail line where snow had finally erased the last traces of the route. The town looked the same, but it wasn't. At a stoplight, a pedestrian glanced at the dogs, then at Ethan. He nodded once. Recognition without questions. That was enough. As dusk approached, snow began to fall again. Lighter this time, drifting instead of striking. The streetlights caught each flake and let it pass. Ethan parked near the edge of town and shut off the engine. He didn't get out right away. Rex waited. Nova waited. Ethan rested his hands on the wheel and looked ahead. In war, endings were loud or unfinished, rarely both clean and quiet. This one was quiet. "Ready?" he asked. Rex's tail flicked once. Nova leaned forward, just enough to touch his elbow with her nose. Ethan opened the door. They stepped out together and walked the block, boots and paws moving in rhythm. No commands passed between them. No promises needed repeating. Snow continued to fall, covering the road behind them. Not to hide anything, just to let it rest. They were back in formation, not as a miracle, not as an exception, but as what they had always been. A soldier, a son, a mother, standing where they belonged.